All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Taking Stock Live. I can't think of anyone better to take stock about what's going on in the world, in the retail industry, and really industries of all sorts, shapes, and sizes than Matt Shay. Matt is an incredible leader who I've had the opportunity to watch from afar, certainly earlier in my career, and then in the last 2 years from a much closer proximity as I've joined the board of the National Retail Federation 2 years ago. And, the accolades for Matt are stunning. He has been recognized by CEO Update as a trade association CEO of the year and by Association Trends as an association executive of the year. And since his arrival in 2010 at NRF, he has really transformed the National Retail Federation into Washington's most powerful voice, supporting the retail industry where I got my start. So as I got ready for this, I actually used my AI co-pilot to summarize all of my internal and external interactions with Matt. And the summary was, he is strategic, he is advocacy driven, he is collaborative, and he focuses on innovation and industry. And so, I don't know, I think Copilot did a pretty good job, but Matt, the president and CEO of the National Retail Federation, welcome to the show.
Shelley, thank you. And I love the result you got using the fabulous AI tool that you deploy and we all use whenever we can. So I 100% endorse that approach, and I'll take that description every time.
Good. I thank you for the official endorsement from NRF of Copilot. Well, he'll be happy to know it. Now, one of the things that I know people are always super interested in as they listen and watch these is sort of how did you get your start? So tell me a little bit about your first job, how you got, and really how you began early in your career.
Well, like many of us, I had a lot of jobs in high school and college and law school, but the official real profession began after law school, working at a small trade association in the state capital, Columbus, Ohio, which coincidentally represented the retail industry. And I did that for about 4 years. And then I moved to Washington and worked for another trade group, the International Franchise Association, for 17, the last few as the CEO. And then I came to NRF, as you noted, about 15 years ago. So I've only had two employers in the last 35 years. One was the Franchise Association, and the other one is the NRF. And they've been fantastic experiences. I've been very, very lucky and get to work with great entrepreneurs, visionaries, leaders, businesses and brands, and people like you. So I've been very, very lucky.
Well, I mean, it's an incredible trajectory. And I do remember at some point I got an email from you, speaking of your Ohio roots, back to, so I think some of Microsoft building a major data center very close to either where you grew up or where you went to school. And so to think about sort of the connection back from where you began to what you're doing now and how we interact, it's wonderful to think about.
Yeah. It's been a great journey. That was all cornfields when I was a kid. And that's sort of where Les Wexner built the entire town of New Albany, the Limited Brands founder. And so there's an entire ecosystem of retail on the east side of Columbus that did not exist. And now, of course, like everything in our economy, seemingly, and retail, it's turned into a technology hub as well. So it's been an amazing transformation.
Amazing. And what Les Wexner has done, it's incredible. So now fast forward to 2010, you joined NRF. You really have, and again, I get a front seat to watch it, but you've been at the forefront, shifting really reframing the narrative around retail globally, and particularly digital, the future of retail. And there's so many transformations to talk about, but first, just some of the transformations that as you see them.
Well, the thing that I was that I found so compelling, I was so attracted to, was when I interviewed for the job, the search committee was composed of Terry Lundgren, then CEO and chairman of Macy's, Steve Sadoff, then Chairman CEO of Saks, Roger Farah, then President and COO of Ralph Lauren, and Kip Tindall, the founder and CEO of the Container Store. So that was the search committee. And we had a fabulous, and they're all great executives, great friends to this day. And I remember walking out of the first interview thinking, I would go work for these guys even if I didn't get a raise. I didn't tell anybody that, fortunately. But the conversation that we had, and this was in the midst of the recession. So this is January, February, March 2010. The unemployment rate is above 10.2%, 10.3%. The economy was terrible. A different recession than the pandemic, a different recession or economic sort of interruption that we've seen in other periods. And it was really driven, there was enormous job loss and there was a lack of consumer credit and consumer spending. So there were thousands and thousands of stores closed, businesses shuttered. And the conversation we had was that the NRF needed an advocacy footprint that was reflective of the economic footprint of the industry. Here was this enormous industry that created all these jobs, all these businesses, touched all these lives, but the advocacy footprint wasn't reflective of that. And we all sort of aligned around the thought that we were fighting way below our weight class and we should step up. You know, the conversations we had about who we were, what we did, and for whom we did it in terms of the visibility and the role of the retail industry. And so that then kicked off a series of research studies, advocacy conversations, campaigns. And the NRF was a much, much smaller enterprise then. I think we were, annual budget was, about a fifth of what it is today. So we've had enormous growth in the last 15 years. But it all began with those conversations about emphasizing advocacy and telling the story in a more impactful way with better data and in a more credible fashion. And that really has turned into creating an organization that people believe they have to be part of. And that's contributed to the growth and the success.
I mean, that's like that anecdote in and of itself of, meeting really those icons, although of course they wouldn't describe themselves that way, in the retail industry, thinking through the advocacy footprint. And then to your point, sort of fighting back, like there's so many ingredients in there that are so important. That was of course 2010, but are so important to think about for now. And obviously what you've done with the NRF. I mean, I know in my Microsoft capacity, because I have other industries that I look after, they all sometimes see what we're doing with NRF and the momentum and the draw. And, frankly, they have, I think, industry envy because you've created such a focal point for the industry within the NRF. But I think, it's easy to listen to you and say, gosh, I mean, that, today is hard too, in terms of challenges and opportunities. So how you sort of take those lessons and think about what the retailers are facing now in terms of opportunity for innovation?
Yeah. I was had this conversation with someone earlier. I think of the world as a relative place, not an absolute place. So in relative terms, this is a challenge, but relative to the pandemic or the early years here at NRF, this is, an enormous amount of uncertainty, but we'll find a way. We found a way in the past. I'm confident we'll find a way again. And we're doing so now with a stronger, more credible voice, with greater resources, a better team, stronger membership, healthier balance sheet, all the things that we need to face the uncertain policy environment, the uncertain economic environment that's sort of become really a feature of the last, half decade that we all have to navigate. And so, as we think about all those, and I talk to our CEOs, all the CEOs on our board and executives like you and leaders, other CEOs across the industry, frequently we hear the phrase, well, we're going to control what we can control and not get distracted by everything else. And I think that's that's sensible and that's practical, but I don't think it suggests that we ignore what else is happening. We just have to acknowledge and accept that we can't control it. And so in that regard, we're trying to do the same thing. I mean, we have to be sensitive to the policy changes and the macroeconomic conditions and the rapid development and deployment of technology and all we do. We have to be aware of all that, but NRF can only control so much. And so if we're going to use our voice to talk about an issue, whether it's a policy issue or whether it's an issue related to the industry and industry relations, we have to make sure that we're choosing the right issues, because it's a place for the NRF to deploy its capital, and jumping in on every issue just doesn't make sense. And so I think, years ago, the other sort of way I talked to the team about this years ago is, yes, we're a nonprofit association and we're a trade association, we're nonprofit, but the only day we're a nonprofit association is the one day a year when we file our tax returns. And every other day of the year, we have to operate just like a for-profit business. It's a competitive environment. We have to think with a competitive mindset. We've got to be sure that we're delivering real value to our members and all of our members. And you just referenced yourself, you look after other industries as well, among the many segments of business with whom you interact. And you have to make choices too about where should we be? What board should I sit on, if any? Where should my team go? Where should I go? How much should we invest in the relationship financially and otherwise? And all our member companies, retailers, partners, solution providers, everyone is making that assessment and conducting that analysis. And we've been fortunate that relationships like this one with you and your colleagues, that we've been able to make progress and show value. And that is not something that you can do either, with any of your members on a sort of formulaic basis. I mean, it's personal relationships, and it's having the credibility and establishing the baseline of expectations and trying to meet those consistently. So I think in this environment, we'll just keep trying to do that on the advocacy side, on the industry relations side, on the partnership side. And I feel pretty confident that, notwithstanding the things we can't control, that we have a good solid foundation to build on.
Totally. And I've never heard you tell that story of sort of, the 364 days of a year we're like a for-profit, but, and except for when we file our taxes. And it makes so much sense to me because you're right. The members, the alignment that certainly the member retailers feel, and of course, those of us who are privileged enough to partner and be sponsors, really feel that just business-minded outcome in terms of whether it's, drawing new people to the big shows or into some of the innovative programming that you put on, to, thinking about like the database outcomes and how we track consumer spending. Like it does feel like a business where you're continuing to innovate and grow alongside the member base.
Yeah, and a lot of the services we provide, you can get other places, right? Retailers can get you can go to someone else that conducts a conference, that does a trade show, that publishes a magazine, has a website. I mean, lots of the products and services we deliver are available from for-profit competitors. And similarly on the advocacy side, sure, there are benefits to acting collectively. So the reason you have, Walmart and Target and Amazon and some of the largest companies in America and the world sitting around the table together is, even for companies with that kind of scale and sophistication and those resources, there are some things that they can't or aren't able to do by themselves. And it makes more sense to do that in collaboration with an entire industry group, speaking for all the members broadly. But even those companies could say, well, we've got our own teams in place, corporate, or we've got outside lobbyists, or we've got law firms. So I think you have to defend it constantly. And I think you have to think both about offense and defense. I mean, someone else always wants what you have in this town, especially. And when it comes to advocacy and your voice, I think we have to make sure we have a really well-resourced, funded, credible voice, or someone will take it.
Yeah. I'm so happy you framed it that way, because I think that was one of the things that really struck me about NRF. Like, in an industry where every single day competitors are battling for, consumers' wallets, whether it's, Walmart, Target, and Amazon, or, sort of you name it, to then see them come together. And by the way, like, we sit next at Microsoft, I sit next to some of the competitors that I compete with every day. But like the cause is like the things that we can do as a collective are bigger than what any of us could do as individual companies, and setting that agenda is really probably, I would imagine, one of the most complicated in terms of which priorities to go after. One of the most complicated things you and your team have to do. So maybe talk us through a little bit in terms of the policy issues that you and your team decide to focus on. How do you pick them, and how do you think about them impacting retailers and consumers?
Yeah, Shelley, that's the sort of the decision-making, prioritization question comes up a lot when people say, when you've got an executive committee that has, Tractor Supply and Walmart, and also has LVMH and Saks, like, what do those companies have in common? Like, how can you ever agree on anything? Or if you have a board that has the CEO of Walmart US and the CEO of Amazon Consumer and Retail, how can you agree on anything? And it's been enormously surprising to me that in 15 years here, there's never been a single policy issue on which we couldn't achieve consensus among the board and the leadership. There hasn't been any open conflict, or really any sort of subtextual conflict, because the work that we do is so focused on the issues that impact the industry broadly. So if it's tax issues, so corporate tax, that affects everyone pretty much equally, and the largest guys, of course, have the most exposure. But there are tax issues, there are trade issues, there are regulatory issues, workforce issues. And, we have a committee that's called our Talent Acquisition Group that our foundation leads. And the Talent Acquisition Group is composed of almost 100 executives at the companies I just mentioned and many others, who are out recruiting every year for new talent, and, young people coming through the pipeline, or people of all ages to fill positions. And, that meeting has been hosted by LVMH at their offices. It's been hosted by the Home Depot at their offices. It's been hosted by Tractor Supply. It's been hosted by Nord's. I mean, because they all want young, frequently, these are recruiting out of college, but all levels, of course, but primarily focused on young people coming out of college. And they all want the same kinds of candidates. And they're not fashion necessarily. They're science, technology, the STEM. Those are the people. They need digital engineers and marketing people. So there's an enormous amount of commonality. And so when we set priorities, we set them based on the input from the board, the executive committee, our various standing policy committees, the legal committee. And it's generally focused on those big macro economic issues, because the retail industry is so reflective of what's happening in the economy, that if there are challenges at the macro level, it's going to be reflected in retail. And there were some specific, years ago was the internet sales tax issue, and, privacy and data issues. Sometimes, there are different views on, you can find a few discrete items, but in general, we stick to the macro issues. And when it comes to those, there's usually commonality of opinion on what's the objective and how do we get there.
One piece that you also do incredibly well is, some of the smallest, I sit in the board and there are some very small retailers there that are starting, digital first, just getting started, high customer service, couple stores even. And they're at the table too. And sort of to be discussing policy matters with, Walmart and Amazon when you're like a one person or small e-commerce startup. It's just, it's the way that you and the team thread that needle to represent the industry is I think, a lesson in management that all of us could learn from.
Well, it's the NRF is, probably 115 years old now, more than 110. And the NRF is the product over those 100 years of multiple mergers and integrations and lots of smaller associations and lots of, ancillary and related businesses in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And there's always been a small business component of the NRF's membership and its predecessor entities' memberships. And I think, if you talk to the CEOs of the largest member companies at NRF, Walmart, Target, they will say, those sitting on the board will say, for them, the diversity of the NRF membership, the fact that we do represent the entire scope and breadth and depth of the industry makes the NRF more valuable to them. And they are enormous partners, of course, with small businesses. So there's a logical connection there. And it also adds more emphasis and I think more effectiveness to our voice when we can go in, not just with the largest companies in America, but with a representative group that says this is going to affect all of us. And maybe we'll feel it in different ways. We'll feel it at different times, or we'll benefit from it different ways, different times. But it does help tell, I think, a more complete story and more representative story about the industry from sort of side to side and top to bottom and bottom to top and in every direction. And it strengthens our voice. And I guess that's sort of the diversity is strength lesson. And I think it's very true. And it's especially true for a big, broad industry trade group. If you're going to be an industry trade group, you really have to represent the entire industry. And you just can't claim that credibly unless you actually do it. And I think, we're fortunate that NRF is able to do it.
It's super. And it does feel that way. And as, our CEO likes to say, it like it shows a complete thought, it like sort of from the biggest to the smallest. So now let me take you a little bit, because I've been dancing around it a little, but I think, your leadership itself is special, Matt, in the way you think about change, the way you think about advocacy. Talk a little bit if you have certain leadership principles or strategies or just how you think about leadership more broadly.
Well, that's a good one. It's interesting. I mean, I think the time we all learn things about leadership. We have experiences. We have, trial and error. We find our own sort of levels of confidence about things. And at least in the association world, in the things that I've been fortunate enough to do at my previous, position and then here, and maybe it's the people I worked with or learned from. My view was always that our job was to, support our members and help our members find the right answers. But it's supposed to be membership driven. This is about the companies. It's the industry and the companies. It's their equity. It's their association. And if they want to do something, as long as it's not illegal, amoral, or unethical, even if we think it's a goofy idea, you have to do it because that's what they want. But feeling comfortable that, you don't have to be standing on the table yelling at your members. That's just not what I'm good at. And I'm not sure what I'm good at, but it's not that. I'd say as I've gotten older, you go through life and hopefully you continue to gain greater levels of humility and gratitude for where you are. So I try to be, hire the best people in the room and then let them do their jobs and stay out of their way. And I think the team would say that's accurate. I'm not a micromanager. I'm smart enough to know that everybody that works with me is smarter than I am at what they do. I was a lobbyist a long time ago, never as good as my colleague who runs our policy shop. I was the lawyer a long time ago, never as good as, I could dabble in communications, not nearly as good as art. So I know. And the other things that people do around here, I couldn't begin to do. So even the areas where I had experience, not nearly as good. I think as much transparency as possible for the team when you think about leading. And, I mentioned, humility, trying to be more empathetic. I mean, there's sometimes you have to make a decision. And so you do. I'm happy to ultimately make the decision after everybody's had an opportunity to share a perspective. And years and years ago, when I first got here, I had a longtime partner who was she was CFO, then COO, then EVP, and she retired a few years ago. But I remember she repeated this to me years, many, many times. She said, "Matt, do you remember the first question you asked me when you talked to me about being promoted to take on more?" And I said, "I think." And she said, "You said that I could not do this job unless I could say no to you." And I think having a team that will say no, as opposed to just say, "Yeah, you know what you're doing. Okay, I don't necessarily agree, but that's fine." I mean, you need people that will stand up to you and say that's wrong, and then defend it. So I think, being appropriately humble about what you get to do and with whom you get to do it, making sure you're leading with the right example. I mean, you have to show up. You have to do what you asked your team to do. And you've got to make sure that you respect them enough to listen to them when they tell you something, because that's what you want. The best quote I ever heard about leadership, one of the best, was years and years ago. I got to know the late General Secretary of State Colin Powell, and over the years saw him at various things. And he told me once that when asking him about leadership, he said, "Matt, when I was in Vietnam as a first lieutenant, by the time I finished my tour of duty, my company would follow me over the next hill, if for no other reason than out of sheer curiosity." And he said they trusted me so much that they would follow me because they knew I was going to take them somewhere that we, number one, needed to go, but I was willing to go first, and I thought about it, and I made the decision, and they believed in me. And I thought that was such a great definition of they trusted you enough to follow you if for no other reason than out of curiosity. And hopefully we're all curious about where we're going, and that keeps us, young and interesting and smarter and relevant, and we never get tired of what we get to do.
I mean, that is, wow. There's so many things in what you just said, just sort of playing back. And I see it obviously, like, you're so open to new ideas. As a leadership principle, you support the talent that's around you. You work transparently, and then you ask for the transparency back. Obviously, anyone who's listening and paying attention can feel the humility. And I love the piece around creating the environment for the team to say no, because that's actually when you really know that it's, bi-directional, and it's not, because the boss said. I'll add one more that I observe about you, which is around relationships. I think, you're always the first to kind of, see that personal relationship angle to help, the people that you work with. And so it doesn't feel like Matt's reaching out for something other than, "Hey, I want to give you the heads up," or "This is something that I'm seeing." And it really adds a completely different dimension to how people get to work and experience you as a leader. And the Colin Powell thing, my goodness, if people would follow you, not because they just trust you, but because out of curiosity, that's something for all of us listening to take in. Okay, so now we're going to close out this fascinating conversation with something that's maybe just a little bit more lighthearted and fun, Matt, which is, I know, also a piece of how you like to lead. We call these the Fun Five. They're kind of random, and I'm just going to fire them at you, and you can elaborate or be as brief as you want to be. And there's no trick answer. What is the weirdest thing you've ever eaten?
Donkey.
Oh, Okay, I need to know more, but I'm going to keep moving. Your favorite superhero?
I think probably Superman.
Yeah.
Hard,
How
hard
could,
to beat Superman.
yeah. Best invention ever?
Uh, well, I want to go back to sort of like in the current moment, there are lots of things we could pick, but I kind of like like, the age of sail and the age of exploration and, shipbuilding and so things that took people around the world to visit new places. So I'd go, you know, transportation in general. And I'm not going to say the wheel. I don't want to go back that far, but let's say the great age of sail and sailing ships.
I mean, how great. And like just as you said it, the visual of being on the ocean
Yeah.
and that
The
feeling,
romanticized, right?
exploration. Yeah. And openness.
The
Um,
voyage.
okay. This one, especially for you, because you've been a fly on the wall and, and probably more things than you will ever reveal on this podcast. But if you could be a fly on the wall, who would you want to listen to and why?
Um, this is probably so cliche-ish, but it's because there's so many great moments in history, uh, and I won't make it too deep. But I would like to be in the cabinet ministers' war rooms with Winston Churchill in the middle of the Battle of Britain, and there've been movies about it and books about it, and I've been there a couple of times and stood there and seen the. Couple 2 years ago, got to go actually in the room and saw the chair, and you could see the marks. You could see the marks in the armchair where he wrapped his ring on it, and but that moment in history and how he sort of stood against the United States wasn't with him. France was overrun. I mean, he was kind of all by himself, and he was 65, 66 years old. He'd been passed over. He was a has-been politically, and he got thrust into this. And he managed to find a way to bring the world together and defeat Nazism. And I mean, it was not easy, but it was a remarkable moment in history. So to me, that would be really compelling.
Yeah, well, incredible. I recently had a chance, not exactly the same, but to go into the bunker, his bunker, and you
Yeah.
just like you see where he slept. Your point, you see like the maps with all the pins on it and what he was facing. So so alone in many ways, and the greatness of it. If you get to go back, bring me with you.
Hey,
Okay, now this one, dream. What would be your dream job and why?
now, well, I mean, I think I have it. I think I have something that I finally figured out how to do. When I was a teenager, through high school, I thought I was going to be an oceanographer, and I had my scuba card a long time ago. I was only in my mid-teens, got it early, dove a lot when we were on summer holidays. Thought, okay, I'll go to be in the Navy or be a photographer, Sylvia Earle and National Geographic and all that. And it, life took a couple of different turns. So I'm not an oceanographer, but that would have been, I thought, exploring things that, not everyone gets to see. To me, it was really fascinating. So that would have been quite interesting.
It's not too late, Matt. we need you at the National Retail Federation, but the ocean and exploration and just the ability to see kind of new worlds. I see it. I see it for you and for all of us through you, Matt. I can't thank you enough for spending time with me. For all the people that are now out there listening to this, it was such an incredible story from your background to the ways in which you're steering the retail industry, and then, of course, your unbelievable leadership philosophy. So thanks so much for taking, a busy time in Washington to be with all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks for the partnership, but also more importantly, thanks for the friendship. I'm really grateful.
Oh, it's mutual. Thank you. Well, thank you all and especially to Matt for that incredible conversation. I learned so much. And I also learned so much from all of you in your comments, in your feedback, and just at all your observations. So please keep that feedback coming to me on LinkedIn. Keep sharing what you want to hear more of, and let's keep this incredible Taking Stock community going. Thank you so much.